Alright, I don't really know why I'm doing this. There are other book series, more relevant book series that I could do this with. You know, those would probably get more attention, more views. Speaking of which, I am making my way through the Shatter Me books right now. I should have something on those by the end of the summer. Stay tuned. But when I heard that there was a book series about a girl falling in love with a brooding bad boy who brings the stories of Edgar Allan Poe to life, I had to read it. You know, that is just bonkers enough that it gets my attention and makes me intrigued and makes me want to know more. Unfortunately, that is not quite what happens in Nevermore. It's about a brooding bad boy with some sort of magical powers that don't make sense, and he fights a demon who also has powers that don't make any sense, and I'm not sure what her motivation was. Like, even by the end of the series, I don't know exactly what she was planning on doing, and she doesn't have any motivation for being evil. She is just evil. You know what I have motivation to do, though? I have motivation to get you guys to buy some of my merchandise. I got, like, shirts and sweaters and hats and stuff. Check it out down below. You can, you know, get them shipped to you before the tariffs kick in. Despite Edgar Allan Poe seeming like he would be a really big part of this series, there's surprisingly little stuff with him in here, especially after the first book. Like, it took me a while to even realize that the name Nevermore comes from The Raven, which is a poem by Edgar Allan Poe. And for those unfamiliar with it, basically just a guy's wife died, and then he's talking to a raven, and the raven just only ever says nevermore, and that's code for, dude, she's dead, get over yourself. The other books in the trilogy don't have titles from the works of Edgar Allan Poe, though, because it goes Nevermore, Enshadowed, and then Oblivion. Basically, when I first started this, I thought these books were going to be written by someone who had a hyperfixation on Poe, and it wasn't. And just to be clear, a lot of books do have similar names, so I'm talking about Nevermore by Kelly Krieg. This is not Nevermore, the Maximum Ride novel, or Nevermore the Band, or Evermore, which is a different series of paranormal young adult novels, or Nevernight, or it is, for the most part, much less exciting and weird and much more standard than I was hoping it would be, which is a shame because Nevermore does have a couple of strengths. You know, some of the descriptions are fantastic, and the dialogue isn't awful either. There are some individual scenes that have Isabel, the protagonist, her name is Isabel, we'll get to her later. There are some individual scenes which have her using her powers in a cool way. I thought that, in the first book at least, the main romance was pretty good, because it's between a weird goth loner and a preppy blonde cheerleader who thinks that he's a potential school shooter. But she realizes that he's an okay guy, he just has some trauma and other mental issues that he needs to get over. And I would love it if the books had, you know, really explored his psyche and we could see what makes him tick. Unfortunately, the main character is not the brooding bad boy, it is the preppy cheerleader. So all we get are very surface level explorations of the psychological stuff, and none of it is subtle at all. Like, people just come right out and say everything that's going on. And the preppy cheerleader main character does have some personality at first, but she loses it over time. Sometimes the story drags a bit, and that would be fine if the more impactful moments were, you know, like, more impactful. Or if the books just really leaned into the craziness of the setup, because, again, the setup here is really bonkers at times. Because if the books did that, I don't think they would necessarily be good, but they would be a lot more enjoyable. And instead, we wind up with a very, very standard paranormal romance from the early 2010s, except it's slightly worse than you might expect, because most of the other ones at least explain the paranormal stuff. They explain the supernatural, magical parts of the setting. And I'll get more into it later, but for now, just understand that I have no idea how to explain the paranormal stuff that happens in Nevermore. Like, at all. I cannot explain what goes on here. There is some magic stuff here, and that's all I can say for certain. Normally, you can summarize urban fantasy pretty easily. You know, you can just say, yeah, it's the real world, but there's also a secret society of vampires that exist, and the vampires, they drink blood, and they have to avoid the sun. And, you know, that gives you an idea of what the setting for that story is like. I have no idea how to describe the magical happenings of Nevermore. They just straight up don't make sense. And for any sort of fantasy, not making sense is a death sentence. Even if everything outside of that was great, and let's be clear, everything outside of that is not great, but even if everything outside of that was great, that would sink it. And I took a really long time to finish this book series. To give you an idea, I wanted this video to be out in March. I don't know, I couldn't focus on reading very much. I was going through some things. I'm still going through some things, and Nevermore, the books are just not that good, and they're very long, so that didn't help matters either. Nevermore is disappointing. If you want to know exactly how and why, then you have come to the correct place. And hey, just for fun, here is a paranormal young adult romance bingo card, so you can fill it out and follow along while we go through this. Anyways, spoilers ahead. So there's not a whole lot of background exposition that you need to know about this series beforehand. There is some sort of other world that some people can sometimes enter via their dreams. I'm just calling it the dream world. And those people have control over what happens in the dream world. Sometimes the dream world can merge with reality, or sort of halfway merge with reality, and that will cause chaos. Also, demons exist. By the end of the series, that's all we know about demons. They exist and they are evil. So I'm just going to introduce some of the characters, and the rest will come up as needed. So first of all, we have Isabel Lanley. She is the protagonist. Isabel is a totally normal teenage girl who lives in Trenton, Ohio, which is kind of like living inside of a tray of ice cubes and meth. Isabel also spells her name like this, which is a weird way of spelling it, but okay. Now, she is a cheerleader, and she's actually a pretty good one. She goes to competitions, and her team wins and stuff, and she's pretty good at it. And she has a boyfriend and a circle of friends, and at the beginning of the series, they all seem to get along. Some people assume that because she's a blonde cheerleader, that automatically means she's shallow and stupid, but she's not. She's a perfectly nice, normal girl. So she'll be represented by this stock photo of a blonde cheerleader on a field. Then there's the love interest of the hour, Varen Nethers. That's actually his name. I don't know what it is with shitty young adult novels and giving their characters really strange names, because their names are always weird in the exact same way. Like, are these books all written by that one lady with the chalkboard and all the baby names on it? So anyways, Varen is an edgy emo bad boy, except he's not really a bad boy, as we find out pretty early on, and he'll be played by Gerard Way. Who else could it be? He doesn't really do anything suspicious or weird. At the beginning, he and Isabel, they have gone to school together for a bit. They are vaguely aware of each other's presence, but they don't know each other. They're just classmates. He's just a quiet, unassuming goth kid, and Isabel, for whatever reason, is afraid of goths. She's been like, I guess this book takes place 2 weeks after Columbine or something, except it doesn't. It takes place in the early 2010s. Varen has a nice car, and he lives in a literal mansion, but he has this indescribable darkness inside him, and he expresses his pain through art. There's also Isabel's boyfriend. His name is Brad, because stereotypes are funny. And so, here's Brad Taylor from Home Improvement. Brad is a football player, because stereotypes are funny. He's a huge jerk at first, and then his personality vanishes completely. That actually happens with a couple of characters in this series. They start off maybe not unique, but they have something to them. They feel like people with desires and flaws and, that sort of thing. And then they have to move out of the way to make room for plot, and then they just act in ways that move the story forward, or they just vanish completely into the background. I guess we have to make room for the more important characters to do shit. Then there's Isabel's younger brother, whose name is Danny. He is about 12 years old, and he's always playing video games. He is very much a younger sibling. He annoys Isabel at every opportunity. Sometimes he does it on purpose, sometimes he does it just by being himself. But the point is, he acts like a real kid. He's not like a child in a horror movie where he goes out of his way to be stupid and cause problems for everybody else. Like, he annoys Isabel, sure, but he does it just by, again, being a 12-year-old younger brother, and he does help her out at 1 or 2 points when she needs it. He's oddly important to the plot sometimes, and his name is Danny, so here's Danny DeVito. And of course, Edgar Allan Poe does play a role in this story, so I have to bring him up too. I have a theory that Edgar Allan Poe's modern incarnation is Tim Burton, so I'm using this picture of Tim Burton to represent him. Although I'll be honest, I do feel a little bad associating Tim Burton with Poe because, look, Poe was a great writer, okay? That's why we're still talking about him and his work when he's been dead for over 150 years. But there's another really important detail about him and his life that these books just kind of gloss over. Yeah, Edgar Allan Poe married a 13-year-old girl when he was in his late 20s. And some people are going to jump in the comments and go, well, that was normal back then. Yeah, that was normal back then. It was normal to be a pedophile back then. That doesn't make it okay. Now, Isabel's dad, who I don't believe gets a name, he's just Isabel's dad, does become important later on, so I'll include him here. There's not a lot to say about him, he's just her dad. He doesn't trust goth kids, he doesn't like goth kids, so he doesn't trust Varen throughout the story. And I don't know who to put here, so I'm just going to use this picture of Yevgeny Prigozhin. What's he going to do, fucking sue me? So these are all the characters that you need to know at first, and all the other relevant characters will come up in time. So we start with Book 1, Nevermore. The prologue is where Edgar Allan Poe is on a train, and he gets attacked by some demons that no one else sees, and then he's swallowed up by some darkness. And that's it. There is nothing else to say about this prologue. All three books have a prologue dealing directly with Poe, and all of them do nothing. You know, it lets you know that supernatural stuff exists, but we were already going to learn that pretty soon. So anyways, we cut to the modern day. Isabel Lanley is in English class. She's attending English class in Trenton, Ohio, which is kind of like learning Chinese from Mel Gibson. I don't understand that joke either, but I'm going to leave it in. There's a group project coming up where they have to make a presentation about a famous American writer. And Isabel gets partnered with who else but Varen Nethers. He is an awkward, quiet, goth loner. She turned her head slowly and took a long, reluctant look to the opposite end of the room. He sat in the back row against the far corner, slumped in his seat and staring straight ahead through shreds of inky locks, his thin wrists lined in black leather bands specked with hostile silver studs. This could not be happening. The book tries really, really hard to make it clear why she's nervous around him. The problem is that her nervousness is ridiculous. Being afraid of goths in the early 2010s is like being afraid of a glass of water. Like, if you wanted Isabel's apprehension to make sense, you would have to, you know, give a reason for it. I will say, though, that this is a little bit different than other books in this genre because they did know each other vaguely before this, and Isabel is just not that attracted to him. So it's not like love at first sight where she's constantly thinking, he's so hot, I love him so much. So things are awkward for a minute when they first are talking to each other, and they agree to meet up later to work on the project. And without permission, he writes his phone number on her hand. That's a weird thing to do, but it is understandable that an awkward 17-year-old loner might do something like that without asking first. That does make sense. So Isabel has a friend named Nikki, and the two of them debate about whether or not it's okay for her to tell her boyfriend Brad that she's working on a project with Varen. Again, this is literally just a school project, guys. You don't have a choice. Just say, yeah, it sucks, I'm working with that weirdo, and then you move on with your day. I don't know why they make such a big deal out of this. Like, Nikki says Varen seems to be a future school shooter, and she mentions the Trenchcoat Mafia. For some reason, again, what's going on here? Why are they like this? Later, Isabel actually walks in on Brad threatening Varen, though. He tells him to stay away from my girlfriend. Again, it's a fucking school project. And everyone's acting like he's been stalking her or something. So Isabel tells Brad off and says that he is overreacting. Because he's clearly being controlling, he uses some homophobic language to describe Varen, and he smokes. There's no subtlety here, and honestly, I have no idea why Isabel is dating Brad. Like, there's not a single moment of tenderness or chemistry between them at any point. She is, however, mad at him for threatening Varen, which, yes, that's a reasonable response to what happened, but she still gets in his car with him and he drives her home. When she's at home, she's with her younger brother, Danny, and he plays video games. What a loser. Like, that's how the books treat it. Like he's a loser for playing video games. Like, oh, Okay, to be fair, he's pretty much always doing it, so I can see why Isabel is annoyed with him. So she tries to call Varen on the phone, but she remembers that he told her not to call him after 9 o'clock at night, so she hangs up. But he calls back right away, and she apologizes for what happened with Brad. Look, I talked to him about it, she said, the words coming out quick and jerky. She hated sounding so spastic, especially when he seemed so unconcerned. He just gets like that. Well, I guess it doesn't matter as long as he has you to make excuses for him. Ouch. That one, ouch. So they argue for a bit after that, and he hangs up, and she's mad because at some point he says that she is not his type. And she goes, well, what exactly was his type anyway? The Bride of freaking Frankenstein? Which, you know what? That's realistic, because hot girls are not used to being rejected. She was clearly expecting to be fending off his advances, and then she got salty when that didn't happen. That is a real thing in the real world. So later they're at the library, and Varen just says, hey, let's do our project on Edgar Allan Poe. And he talks about his death and how no one knows exactly what happened to him. He was found in a gutter, he was ranting and raving, and then he was sent to a hospital and died a couple days later. Which is true to life. That is how Edgar Allan Poe died. We don't know exactly what happened to him. Isabel reads some of Varen's journal when he's not around, which, why the fuck would you do that? And it's really cryptic, and then he borrows a book about lucid dreaming from the library and leaves. This book is 543 pages long. I'm glad that nothing is fucking happening. Anyways, when she went to the library, Isabel actually lied to her friends. She said she was at the dentist because she doesn't want them knowing that she was with Varen. Imagine what people would say. They would say that she's working on a group project with this weird goth guy. The horror! Later, Varen passes her a note, though, that says, they know you lied. So her friends know she lied about going to the dentist. And they leave her to eat lunch alone after that because Brad still drives her home, though. And on the way, they stop to make out for a bit, and he teases her for a bit about Varen, and she gets flustered, so they just drive home. Later, they go to an ice cream shop called Dessert Island. I kind of love that name. And who's working the counter at the ice cream shop? Well, none other than Varen Nethers. Her friends planned this. They start throwing ice cream around and making a big mess, and then Brad goes behind the counter, and he actually attacks Varen and opens the cash register and starts stealing money. A really big jump from hooliganism to just straight up assault and robbery, but I guess that's life in Trenton, Ohio. Ohio, come for the meth. Stay, because you sold your car to buy meth. But Isabel intervenes, she gets between them, and she manages to get everyone to stop, and she tells Brad she never wants to talk to him again. Her friends leave, and Varen has disappeared. She doesn't know where he is for a minute, and she realizes that her friends found out about this because she left the note that Varen gave her in Brad's car. So that's how her friends found out that she was still seeing him. To work on a fucking school project. Seriously, what's going on here? So she finds Varen in the freezer. He's not crying, but he is upset, rightfully so. Again, he was literally just assaulted by some bullies from his school. And Isabel helps him clean everything up and close up the shop. While they're doing that, he plays a song that references Edgar Allan Poe, and she sees a picture of Varen with a girl, and she assumes that this girl is his girlfriend, and then he just drives her home. Now Isabel is grounded for plot reasons, so she has to sneak out of the house to work on the project again. Why doesn't she just tell her parents that she needs to work on a school project? I don't know. I feel like there was a rough draft of this book where Varen and Isabel were having an actual affair, and that's why she's sneaking around so much and why her friends are so upset with her. But then the author just decided to change it to them working on a school project, but she left everything else the same. So this time to work on the school project, they go to a bookstore. The bookstore is owned by a very sick old man named Bruce. Bruce isn't that important, but I kind of like him and the story does him dirty, so he'll be played by Bruce Wayne, aka Batman. Yeah. According to Varen, this bookstore has a poltergeist named Bess that they have to watch out for. And they just kind of gloss over that and don't really explain it. So Isabel reads Mask of the Red Death, which is an Edgar Allan Poe story about a plague that kills everybody in a castle. Varen says, after reading, that death always wins, and Isabel goes, "This is why people worry about you." What? But she leaves the room for a minute, and when she comes back, Varen has vanished. And she realizes, well, okay, I gotta get home soon, because again, she snuck out. So she runs home, and she takes a shortcut through a nearby park. She sees a bunch of black birds while she's there, and she's like, oh my gosh, ravens! But some large human-like figures appear and chase her, and one of them whispers her name and tells her to run. So she escapes. She's thinking that Brad is pranking her, but she runs away and escapes, and while she's doing this, she actually picks up a branch and tries to fight, which is kind of a nice touch. You know, she doesn't do anything substantial, but it's nice that the protagonist of this sort of book is at least attempting to help herself instead of just falling down and running away and waiting for the men to come and save her. You know, it's nice she's at least attempting to do something. Isabel's mom catches her outside, and she's about to tell her off, but then her brother Danny comes up and saves her at the last second. He pretends that they were taking out the trash together, and Isabel just got scared by a raccoon, which, you know what, that was nice of him. Danny, you're a nice brother. He can tell something's going on with her, but he doesn't know what, and that sort of thing checks out. Younger siblings know when the older ones are going through something, usually. That night, a raven is watching Isabel sleep, so she calls Varen and she accuses him of being the one who chased her. Why does she think that? Anyways, she tells Varen about that and he takes it poorly. "You know," he said, plowing on, sounding more venomous by the second, "despite what everyone has always told you, the world does not revolve around you." "Look," she growled, "I said I was sorry. You don't have to be a jerk about it." "I'm only telling you what nobody else will." "Yeah," she said, her voice rising. "If he wanted to pull out the artillery, that was just fine with her. She had her own guns. Bring it." "Why don't you speak for yourself?" she hissed. "I mean, what screams cry for attention more than walking around looking like the Grim Reaper and scribbling creepy, tortured messages into some book?" "Please," she heard him scoff through a thin scratch of phone fuzz. He was probably using a cordless handset, she realized, and it made her wonder if he even owned a cell. "I don't have to explain myself to you, of all people. Aside from the fact that you wouldn't get it, you—" "Hey!" she cut in. She'd had enough of his more-competent-than-thou condescending crap. If anyone went around thinking themselves superior, it was him. "Just because I live in the sunlight, enjoy being blonde, and wear a cheerleading uniform, that doesn't mean I'm stupid. I'm so sick of that. Just because I wear black and keep a private journal, that doesn't mean I'm going to blow up the school. Or terrorize mindless cheerleaders, for that matter." So these two are both making massive assumptions about each other, and they both look stupid as a result. But that's a thing that real people do, a lot. You know, Isabel thinks Varen is a creepy weirdo because of his fashion sense, but he's actually just a totally nice, normal guy. Varen thinks Isabel is a cruel, vapid, stupid, shallow stereotype, but she's actually a sweet girl who cuts people out of her life when they act like bullies, even though that leaves her very lonely. Both of them just need to stop and listen. And that's why I like the romance in this first book. You know, they learn and they grow from each other. But Isabel eventually tells Varen about the chase, and he says that she's imagining things and says goodbye. Isabel's watch actually was broken earlier because she accidentally dropped her gym bag on top of it. That is a small detail, but it becomes weirdly relevant later on. So Isabel's dad realizes that she's sad, and she doesn't tell him that she broke up with Brad. Her dad really liked Brad. A new girl at school that Isabel doesn't really know is at the locker next to hers, and she comments that Isabel's hair is bad. We'll get back to that in a minute. Brad is now dating Isabel's friend Nikki, and at lunch she can't sit with her friends, so she tries to sit with Varen and his friends, who only appear in a couple of scenes in this book and then are never mentioned again. He has a goth girl who Isabel thinks might be his girlfriend named Lacey, and Lacey just tells Isabel to fuck off. She says, "You act like you're different, but you're just like everybody else," which is true. You know, that's true for everyone involved here. They all want to act like they're different and unique, but really they are just like everybody else. Upon hearing that, Isabel runs off and cries in the bathroom, and she sees a man's reflection behind her for a second, and she screams, and then the girl who has a locker next to hers comes in to check on her. So we learn that this locker girl's name is Gwen. Gwen is very, 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 very Jewish. She's from Brooklyn. She's sassy. She uses random Yiddish words in conversation. It's like a hair's breadth away from being actually anti-Semitic, and we'll get more into that later, don't worry. Gwen deserves to be treated better by the story, and since she's from Brooklyn, I figured, hey, she'll be played by Brooklyn Decker. Why not? So Gwen and Isabel are they're just friends now. Yeah, there's not any sort of build-up to it. Gwen just does all sorts of favors for her, which might make sense if they had been best friends for a long time or something. Like, the story really does treat it as if they've been best friends for years, but they're not. It just sort of comes out of nowhere, and I'm not sure why. Well, okay, I know why. It's because this book is bad. So Isabel's at cheer practice, she gets into a fight with Nikki while she's there, and then she walks off and she's kicked off the squad. That night she wakes up and there's stuff floating around in her room. And then the man she saw in the mirror earlier is also there, and she learns that his name is Reynolds. Now, there's only one person that could play Reynolds, the sexy Canadian acting megastar known as Ryan Gosling. So Reynolds says that Isabel is in danger. Someone is after her. He won't say who it is because names have power. Or maybe the author just likes putting in mystery without any intention of answering that mystery in a satisfying way because she went to the school of J.J. Abrams. Reynolds says that she's in the dream world right now. Like, she's not in the real world. She's waking up in what looks like her room, but, again, objects are floating around and stuff. And he says, hey, I'm going to take you to this forest where Varen is, because in the dream world, people can move to new locations just by thinking. At least I think that's how it works. Again, it's not explained super well. So Isabel's room just sort of fades away and it becomes a forest, and then she wakes up. She convinces herself it was just a dream because she notices all the stuff that was floating around is not, all over the floor like it should be, but apparently her mom picked up the mess while she was sleeping, so she realizes, oh my gosh, it wasn't a dream, it really did happen. So Varen calls her, but she's really mad at him for not telling her about any of the stuff that's going on, and she tells him to do the project by himself and then hangs up. She stays home from school for a bit, pretending to be sick, but Gwen calls her up and relays a story. Apparently Brad went to her locker and started stealing stuff, and Varen intervened and Brad attacked him, so all the lockers mysteriously burst open, except for Isabel's, which slammed shut and wouldn't open again. So this is, implying, again, that Varen has some sort of weird supernatural powers. Specifically, some type of telekinesis that allowed him to do that. It is never explained, though. Not even a little bit. Like, the author clearly forgot about this because he never uses powers of this sort ever again. But that's okay, because Varen just appears outside her window. He brings her ice cream and sneaks into her room and hides from her parents. But then Brad appears at Isabel's house. Her parents let him in because, again, they don't know about the breakup, so they just let him in, and he tries to start dating her again, he kisses her forcefully, and then he leaves. And Isabel never tells her dad about the forceful kiss, so he spends the entire rest of the series just moaning that she's not dating Brad anymore. And then Varen leaves, and Varen was hiding this whole time, just to be clear. So Isabel is back on the cheer squad because, I don't know, she's back on the cheer squad, and Varen asks her out, sort of. He asks her if she wants to go to a goth dance with him on Halloween, which is the gothiest holiday, as we all know. And then Varen meets her parents, and after he leaves, he doesn't do anything bad while he's there. He seems like a perfectly nice, normal, young guy, but her dad is really upset. Isabel couldn't believe this. Her dad was freaking out over nothing. He was blowing a gasket because she'd been doing her homework. You just can't handle that I broke up with Brad, can you? She growled. Whoa, Danny said, taken aback. You broke up with Meathead? No, said her dad, starting to shout. What I can't handle is you being dropped off after midnight by some kid who thinks he's a vampire. And while they're yelling at each other, Danny pipes in and says, if this were in Japanese, it could so be an anime. Yeah, of course. Right, that is definitely a real thing that a real person would say in a real conversation. Kelly Krieg, you know how to write dialogue. This book is less than halfway over, by the way.
Well, that sucks!
So her mom says that her dad is just going to have to get used to Brad not being around, but he'll get used to Varen eventually. but her dad is still upset because he's like, well, Varen is more experienced. That's the exact words, more experienced. Like, he thinks the goth weirdo is, quote, more experienced than the star football player. Okay, sure. Look, the star football player at a high school, that guy is either swimming in more pussy than all of us combined, or he is weirdly religious. Or possibly both. But the point is, no matter what, he's going to be more quote-unquote experienced than Varen. If you're worried about that sort of thing, you should hope that your daughter dates a weird goth loner. So anyways, Isabel goes to bed and then she dreams and sees Reynolds again. At least, I think it's Reynolds. I went back and checked and it is, but like this book likes to go multiple pages without saying a character's name. Just he over and over again, and after a while it becomes kind of unclear who's doing things. Anyways, they're back in the forest and Isabel notices that some creatures are watching her, and Reynolds says that they are ghouls or imps, which are, quote, empty beings from this world. And the woman from before appears, and Isabel and Reynolds run away. This woman doesn't get a name quite yet, and she does take on multiple forms throughout the story, so I'm just going to give her a picture to simplify things, and fuck it, here is Morrigan from Dragon Age Origins. Still the best Dragon Age game. So Reynolds says that Isabel is the only one who can stop this woman, who will remain nameless, and she needs to learn to control the dream. He pushes her out of a door, and she just kind of appears in her bedroom, except she's watching herself sleep in her bed, so she realizes that she's like astral projecting or something. And then her alarm goes off, and she snaps back into her body and wakes up. At school, she kind of hangs off of Varen in front of people in order to try and annoy Varen's ex-girlfriend Lacey, who I'm pretty sure is supposed to also be this woman from before, but it's, again, not explained very well. Also, Varen basically did their whole project, and someone mentions at some point that Poe married his cousin, and Varen gets offended that someone would bring that up. But, like, it happened. You know, even people who aren't very familiar with Edgar Allan Poe's work know that he married his first cousin, who was 13 at the time. Isabel has another friend named Stevie who says that someone left claw marks on Brad's car and that he's planning to hurt Varen because of it. And later, Varen's car has "You're dead, freak" scratched into the side of it. So he and Isabel go to his house to finish up the project. They're pretty close to being done, but they go to his house to finish it up. And there's a piano there, which Isabel makes note of, but nobody plays. Varen says, like everything else, it's just for show. So Varen's mom left when he was a young kid, and it's implied that he doesn't like his dad and his stepmother very much. Also, Isabel sees pictures of him when he's younger, and his hair is naturally blonde. Also, the house he lives in is an enormous Victorian mansion that his dad inherited, because his dad, I don't think they ever specify what exactly he does for a living, but he is loaded. He makes a lot of money. So, but again, this guy lives in a fucking goth mansion. He was abandoned by one of his parents. Like, it's no wonder he became a fucking goth. Isabel finally admits to herself that she does like Varen, and she resolves to say something to him before they finish the project. Why does she like him? Not really sure, but whatever. It's that time of the plot. So the two of them cuddle, and he reads a bit from a poem by Edgar Allan Poe called Ulalume. I think that's how you pronounce that. Isabel gets kind of horned up, and, you know, that's actually understandable in this scenario. Like, sometimes characters in these books will get horny for weird reasons, but no, they're cuddling and connecting a bit. That actually makes sense. But one of the lines from the poem reminds her of something that Reynolds said. And then Varen's parents come home, and he tells her to hide in the closet, which is always a good sign. Varen's dad comes up to his room and screams about a few things. He says that he'll have his car towed away, even though Varen is the one that is paying for it. And he doesn't hit him, but he comes close to it, and he does break some things in his room, and it's implied and then later confirmed that he is an alcoholic. Varen's dad is named Joe, and his only real personality trait is that he gets angry and likes to yell and break shit, so he's going to be played by Joe Pesci as Tommy DeVito in Goodfellas. Varen's stepmom also eventually becomes important, kind of. She's just kind of generically nice, other than leaving her stepchild to the mercy of his terrible father. But besides that, you know, she's nice, I guess. Her real name is Darcy, and I don't really know what to put here, so here is Cinderella's evil stepmother. Look, man, we're on the internet. There are much worse stepmom-related things I could put there. So when Varen's dad, Joe, leaves, some shadows come to life, and they start moving around Isabel and whispering to her, and they stick around for a minute, and then they disappear. And then Varen takes Isabel out the window to get to his car. As they're leaving, Darcy actually sees Isabel. This leads nowhere, but she sees her leaving with him. Varen is driving like a crazy person, like speeding and, running stop signs and stuff. And Isabel begs him to stop, but he doesn't listen until she says that he drives like Brad. And then he chills out and apologizes. There's a lot to unpack there, but we're just going to leave it alone. While they're driving, Varen starts talking to somebody that Isabel can't see. And he, at one point, just says, "Go away." But eventually, they reach her home and Isabel gets out and goes to bed. Well, she doesn't go to bed quite yet because she's worrying that they're going to fail the project because they haven't finished it yet, so she comes up with a plan. And the next day, she brings a boombox into class, and her and Varen pretend to give a radio interview to Edgar Allan Poe, who is played by Isabel's dad. Specifically, Isabel's dad is wearing makeup and a wig, and he has a stuffed raven pinned on his shoulder. And remember that while they're doing this, Varen is wearing his normal goth getup, and he's also wearing sunglasses for some reason, and Isabel is wearing her cheerleader uniform throughout. So throughout all of this, just keep that in mind. It makes it substantially funnier. They go over some of Poe's life and works. It's a school project. It's the sort of thing you would do back then. Nothing unusual happens. But at the end, Isabel's dad mentions that before Edgar Allan Poe died, he was ranting and he was raving. He apparently mentioned someone named Reynolds multiple times. And Isabel freezes up and is like, wait, shit, something bad is happening. So she wraps up the presentation. And then Varen disappears. Like, he just walks out of the classroom and vanishes without a trace. There is still, at this point, almost no information about the supernatural and how it works. So we are left in the lurch. We are not supposed to understand what happens here, I guess. At lunch, Isabel sees a boy with red hair and claws sitting next to Brad, but she also realizes that no one can see him except for her. And as she gets closer and gets a better look at him, she realizes that part of his face is missing, and he doesn't have red hair, it's actually red feathers. We later learn that this guy's name is Pin Feathers, and honestly, while reading, I just kept picturing Birdman, so I'll put Birdman up here. Ta-da! See? That's 2 Michael Keatons on one board. Pin Feathers claims that he and Isabel have actually met before, and he also tells her that Brad apparently found Varen and beat him up the night before. That's why Varen was acting weird during their presentation and wearing sunglasses. He's trying to cover up bruises. Pin Feathers actually attacks Isabel, but he dissolves into dust, and then that dust falls to the floor and gets sucked into the earth without her being hurt. And she's like, what the fuck just happened? So her and Gwen decide to sneak out of school and drive away because Gwen is her best friend now. Just sort of happened out of nowhere. And there's another invisible bird boy eating a bird in the parking lot. And while they're driving away, he actually throws the dead bird at the windshield. And Gwen can't see him, so she's a little confused. She's like, why did this dead bird just hit my fucking windshield? But no one bothers explaining anything to her. So they go to the bookstore that's owned by Bruce, where Varen likes to hang out, and Bruce says he's not there, he left a half hour ago. But if he left a half hour ago, then how could he have been at school earlier? Something weird is happening. And Bruce has a coughing fit, and he says to Isabel, "You don't deserve him." And then they leave and go back to school. Later, at a pep rally, some more invisible creatures that no one else can see attack Isabel. Later, we learn they're called Nox, like the dudes with claws and sharp fangs, and they have feathers, and they're called Nox, so we're just going to refer to them as that from now on. There's some sort of dark creatures from the dream world, which, again, it's never really explained how any of that works. But while she's being attacked, Reynolds does come and save her, and he says that she is between realms, and that's really dangerous. And then we go back to normal. You see, the reason this happened is that while they were at the pep rally, Isabel was trying to do some cheerleader shit, and then she dropped and fell and was briefly unconscious, and then after all that stuff with Reynolds and Knox happens, she wakes back up, and her cheer coach is concerned with what happened, But Isabel's like, no, no, really, I'm fine. Later, they're cheering at a football game, and her friend, Nikki, is no longer dating Brad, and she apologizes and says, hey, I didn't mean to drop you earlier, and Isabel believes her, because she knows, like, yeah, there's fucking invisible creatures going around doing stuff. But Nikki goes, I'm jealous because you're in love with Varen, and I'm not in love with anyone. And Isabel is like, what? He would never allow that.
That doesn't make sense.
I feel like these people think they're having two separate conversations. So Brad is playing football, but he's playing really badly and their team is losing. And Gwen actually comes over to Isabel and pretends that she's throwing a party after the game so that Isabel will have an excuse to not be at home. Her dad is there and he wouldn't let her leave home on Halloween after the football game because, I don't know, reasons. This whole conversation takes multiple pages. So while Brad is playing football, several Nox are surrounding him and doing something to him, and now feels like a good time to confirm that part of the reason Brad has been acting aggressive lately, like more so than usual, is that the Nox and the dream world are somehow influencing him. How does that work? I have no idea. Again, these books don't really bother explaining how things work, and this whole character arc with Brad being manipulated and everything, like it never comes back up. So Pinfeathers appears again and is, again swarming around Brad with other Nox, and Brad gets hurt really badly during a play and he breaks his leg. Isabel gets a cryptic note from Varen. More specifically, it was a note from Varen that Varen gave to Pinfeathers and then Pinfeathers gave to Isabel. And in the note he apologizes and says everything will end tonight. Again, remember, this is on Halloween. It's the same night as that goth concert that Varen invited Isabel to. So Isabel, after the game, leaves with Gwen and another boy whose name is Mikey. They are dressed goth for Halloween, and they have a costume for Isabel, too. She could have just gone as a cheerleader, Like they don't really have time to be wandering around town looking for stuff. Okay, whatever. Just open it, Gwen said. You know you can't wear what you've got on. They'll kill you. Cheerleader meat, Mikey growled as he hit the gas pedal. Again, it's Halloween. She would stand out at a goth concert dressed like a cheerleader, but people would not get upset. Okay. Anyways, Isabel's costume is a pink lacy dress, which would stand out a hell of a lot more than a cheer uniform, but okay. So they block out the rearview mirror so that Mikey can't see, and then she gets changed in the back seat, which feels dangerous. I don't think they're in that much of a hurry. They drive way out into the sticks, and Isabel is slowly getting more and more worried that something bad might happen to Varen. Or maybe she's just worried because the driver can't fucking see behind himself, whatever. So they arrive at Grim Facade, the big goth concert, and Lacey is there, and Isabel is like scared of her for some reason. But anyways, Varen appears. He's wearing a strange white mask, and he and Isabel dance and kiss for the first time, and it's like magical and stuff. He takes her to a nearby abandoned building, he barricades the door, and then he tells Isabel to hide because she, whoever she is, can't find them together. Some shadows attack and then Varen vanishes, but he tells her to find the woodlands and then wait for him on the other side of the door. And then suddenly reality warps around Isabel, and she finds herself in some sort of underground vault. Now, this is when the climax really begins, and it covers the last 100-ish pages of the book. And it's nice that things are finally happening. It's just annoying because it drags for a while. It would have been better to take some of the events in the climax and just sort of spread them out through the rest of the book, just saying. Anyways, Isabel hears two men who are speaking English in Italian accents for some reason, and they are talking about Amontillado. Amontillado should be familiar to fans of Edgar Allan Poe because he has a short story called The Cask of Amontillado. And you might think that this goes into some sort of something that has anything to do with the Cask of Amontillado, but no, it's literally just two guys referencing a specific type of wine, and that's it. Isabel wanders into a party, which she quickly realizes is the party from the Mask of the Red Death. She's surrounded by lost souls who are partying, but they barely notice her presence. And she has 1 hour until midnight to escape, and if she doesn't do that, then she'll die, because everyone dies at midnight in the Mask of the Red Death. Now, Pinfeathers appears and forcibly dances with her, and then he morphs into Varen, and then suddenly, Varen and Isabel are at school. they're dating and they're happy together, and Varen mentions getting dinner with her parents and getting along with her dad, and potentially going to the University of Kentucky when he graduates. Isabel also has memories of dating him, so she starts getting sucked into this illusion, but then she mentions Edgar Allan Poe, and Varen doesn't know who that is, and Isabel realizes, okay, something is wrong, and she runs. And she finds Reynolds, and he says Varen is with her, again, whoever her is. And Isabel needs to seal a link between the real world and the dream world, otherwise the real world will get destroyed. Like, just, hey, there's a big threat that'll destroy the world. Like, it just comes in completely out of nowhere. But Isabel refuses to leave without Varen, and she marches off alone. And I know a lot of you are probably just assuming that Reynolds is Edgar Allan Poe in disguise. That was my first thought as well, but he's not. He's very cryptic, but he does confirm that Edgar Allan Poe is dead. He says that something similar happened to him that is currently happening to Varen. What happened to him exactly? I don't know. Just roll with it. None of this makes sense. Anyways, Isabel finds Varen in a chamber that she can't enter, and Pinfeathers is taunting him and turns into a raven before flying off somewhere. Isabel can also hear the sound of Brad being tortured somewhere nearby, so she resolves to help him and come back for Varen later. She gives Varen a ribbon to assure him that she's real, she's not part of the dream world. And then another Nock appears, just like Pinfeathers. This one has blue hair and indigo teeth. Isabel runs away, and then she finds Brad. He is being buried alive by a couple of Nocks, and Isabel disintegrates one by hitting it with a shovel, and then she punches Pinfeathers in the face. And I'll be honest, I was getting into this scene. I did like this scene, because Isabel doesn't have any powers or anything, but she's refusing to sit back and let something bad happen, even to a person like Brad, who she doesn't really like. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, really, but I've just read so many of these crappy young adult paranormal romance books at this point that when one deviates from the formula in any way, I have to praise it. So Isabel, using her shovel, cuts off one of Pinfeather's arm, and then he freaks out and runs off. And she frees Brad from being buried alive just as the clock strikes midnight. So the Red Death enters the castle, which is off in the distance now, and Isabel gets buried in a landslide, but Reynolds comes by and saves her. He says that Varen created the link between the real world and the dream world, and now they have begun to merge. Varen's body is in the real world, but his soul is in the dream world. Also, his soul is the Red Death now, which is represented by being like this literal giant red mist, sort of. So Reynolds tells Isabel to find the door in the woodlands if she wants to save the day, and some Nocks appear and he fights them off with swords while Isabel runs off to find the door. Pinfeathers appears, and he actually tries to cut off Isabel's arm with a sword, but his sword breaks without hurting her, for some reason that she's not sure of quite yet. She imagines a door, and then one of them appears, and then she goes through it and escapes. She also disintegrates Pinfeathers again. And I actually kind of like this back and forth, where she injures him somehow and he comes back pretty quickly afterwards, because it's unclear if she's able to kill him or how she can kill him. And I kind of like this because it's unclear how she would be able to kill him, or even if it's possible for her to kill him. It makes Pinfeathers actually a pretty good villain, or a good temporary villain, I should say, just for this one little part of the story. So now that she's in the woodlands, Isabel finds the door. There's a sign that says, "Do not enter, beware of Bess." Remember Bess, the poltergeist from the bookstore? Yeah, I forgot about that too. But Pinfeathers appears yet again and warns her against entering, but Isabel realizes that he can't hurt her. She doesn't know why, but she realizes he can't hurt her. That's why his sword broke when he tried to cut off her arm. So she goes through the door and winds up in a room, and in that room there's a book with writing in it that doesn't make much sense. But then Bess appears. She's a ghost figure that doesn't actually, I don't know, again, it's not explained super well. And she says she's also called Lilith. Now Lilith/Bess is cryptic, but she makes it clear that she feels like Varen belongs to her. And Isabel apparently began entering Varen's dreams a couple of weeks ago, and that's been shutting Lilith out, so that's why Lilith is mad at her. I think that counts as a love triangle. Varen has special powers. It's unclear what those powers are, but he has them. "He is special, even in regard to those who have come before him," Lilith continued. Like them, he holds the ability to receive and interpret the shades and shadows of the dream world, to bring life and body to new ones, such as the Nox. What is more, though, is that the energy within him that drives him to destroy as much as he creates, the only thing he lacks is control. That in and of itself is what makes him so perfect. Tonight he is to finish my story. Tonight, when you are gone for good, he will set me free. So now, Isabel is a link between worlds, so she's a source of power unto herself. Again, just sure, the rules here don't make sense. But despite everything Lilith is saying, Isabel grabs the book and then thinks about it being on fire really hard, and then it actually does catch fire and it's destroyed. And then she wakes up and she's being carried by Reynolds. She sees he has a pocket watch on it that says Augustus, and she's like, oh, his real name is Augustus. But that's not a twist, because that doesn't affect anything. Also, we learn later his real name is not Augustus. He says to her that pining for things you can never have will eat away at you. That's what happened to Edgar Allan Poe. And there's a really long chapter just filled with exposition. I will explain the parts of the exposition that actually make sense. So the Nox, like pin feathers, were created by Varen, and since he would never hurt Isabel, he loves her, the Nox will also never hurt Isabel. Like, they are a part of Varen. And when Isabel burned that book, her link to the dream world was severed, so she wasn't hurt by the fire, or by anything else in the dream world. She's fully in the real world now. She's no longer between realms as she was before. Reynolds is something called a lost soul, and Varen would have become a lost soul if she hadn't broken the link by burning that book. Now, what is a lost soul exactly? After finishing the series, I think that they're dead souls that can't pass on into the afterlife, but I'm not totally sure. All I know is that Reynolds is one, Edgar Allan Poe, we later find out, was one. The people at the party with the Mask of the Red Death were lost souls. That's all we know. So Isabel finally arrives home, and her parents are looking for her. Her dad is really, really mad. He says, stay away from Varen. And then later, some police arrive, and they say that Varen has been missing. He's missing, and no one knows where he is, and Isabel realizes he's still in the dream world. Why would he stay there? I mean, why would he stay in the world of his dreams? He has everything he could ever want back home in Trenton, Ohio. Isabel gets her project back alongside an article that her teacher thought was neat. It's about someone named the Poe Toaster, who visits Edgar Allan Poe's grave every year on his birthday, January 19th. And there's a photograph of the Poe Toaster. Why is that so hard to say? There's a photograph of the Poe Toaster leaving flowers at Poe's grave, and in the photograph, Isabel can see that that is clearly Reynolds. And she realizes that if Reynolds can travel to the real world, there must be other ways to still get to Varen. So she tells Gwen that they have to get to Baltimore, which is where Edgar Allan Poe is buried, and she begins coming up with a plan. She still has Varen's jacket, she has it hung up in her closet, and there's a note in the pocket. She reads it and sees it's a love poem, which is meant to say goodbye, because Varen thought that he would never see her again, and she resolves to save him. Then we have an epilogue with Varen standing on a cliff overlooking the sea, and Lilith is there. She asks him if he gets cold being alone, and he just goes, no, and then the book ends. Now it's time to go to Book 2, Enshadowed. It took me over a month to get to reading this one after I finished the first one, and that did not help me understand anything, just so we're clear. On the cover of this one, it says, "The brightest love casts the darkest shadow." I don't know what that means. I don't know how that relates to anything that happens in here. So book 1 wasn't good, but it had a few bright points. You know, the romance was good, Isabel was a non-traditional protagonist in a few very small ways, and there was some good imagery in there at a few points. Book 2 is where shit really starts to slide downhill, because Varen and Isabel barely interact, so the romance is gone, and that was the best part of the first book. I don't know why this is such a common trope, though, because I feel like you should either have them fall in love more slowly, or just have them be together. You know, having the main leads fall in love and then separate for 80% of the series is just annoying. Normally, in crappy paranormal romance, this is where a new love interest gets brought in to create some drama. That doesn't happen here, which is kind of refreshing. but nothing replaces the love triangle either, so there's just nothing here. This book is almost entirely Isabel thinking about how she wants to do something to help Varen. Eventually, later, not now. I really need to make a video just talking about middle book syndrome, and then I can just direct people to that video whenever middle book syndrome comes up. Just like, hey, middle book syndrome, I don't want to spend another 5 minutes going on about this again, because I've talked about it several times. So just go watch this video. Like, I might do that at some point. So we start with the prologue. Edgar Allan Poe is in the hospital. It's very close to the end of his life. He's delirious, he yells about Reynolds for a bit, and then he dies. Nothing important happens. Back in the present, Isabel is getting ready for cheerleading stuff. An apparition of Varen appears, though, and she follows him. They get in his car, he starts driving, but then Isabel notices that some things are odd because clocks are running funny and the fuel gauge says empty but the car is still moving, and then she realizes, oh okay, it's a dream. And Varen says that he's waiting for her, and then they kiss and she wakes up. Isabel thinks that she's late for her cheer competition, but then she remembers that that was a week ago and she won. Also, it's Christmas Eve, so Varen has been missing for almost 2 entire months. Isabel and her dad go to do some last-minute shopping, and he's still upset with her for lying and sneaking around, and she says that she wants to go to Baltimore for a school tour, but he's hesitant about the cost. Now, remember, she wants to go to Baltimore to see Reynolds go to Poe's grave on January 19th. But her dad is again saying, it's kind of expensive, and he just doesn't trust her. Anyways, Gwen shows up at her house. Gwen doesn't celebrate Christmas because, remember, she's Jewish. Yeah, they mentioned that a couple more times, just in case you forgot. Her and Isabel chat for a bit, and Isabel tells her what happened on Halloween night when she went into the dream world. Because it turns out she never explained any of this magical nonsense to Gwen. Gwen just knew something was happening and rolled with it. Okay. I guess there's not much else to do for fun in Trenton, Ohio. Isabel mentions that destroying Varen's journal broke the link between the real world and the dream world. That's why Varen is trapped there now. He was in the dream world when the link was broken. But when she mentions Lilith, Gwen freaks out and just runs outside. She forgets her shoes and runs out barefoot even though it's snowing, and then she speeds off in her car, like a bad scene from a horror movie. Just mention the threat, and then someone screams and runs away. And she literally says, "God help you," while she's driving away. So the Jewish character from New York is really sassy and very high-strung at the same time. No comment. Isabel is upset and misses Christmas dinner. She does put on Varen's jacket and resolve to see him again, though. She has a bad dream about Pinfeathers pretending to be Varen. On Christmas, her brother Danny gets her a watch to replace her old one, which got broken, and then her dad gives her some plane tickets because he has agreed to take her to Baltimore, which renders all the drama about, will her parents take her or not, completely pointless. Gwen finally returns and apologizes for freaking out on her, and she gives Isabel a Hamza pendant. Not Hamas pendant, autocorrect. I swear, every time I typed it, it tried to correct Hamza to Hamas. I don't think Gwen would have a Hamas pendant. It would raise questions if she did. Unless she's like a really big fan of the boxer Steve Hamas. Yes, that was a real person. So Gwen shows Isabel a book about demons which mentions Lilith, and the picture of Lilith comes to life, and they find out that Lilith is dangerous. She's some sort of demon. Isabel says it doesn't matter because, hey, maybe Varen invited Lilith into his mind, but she still wants to save him. Gwen mentions that she had a dream where she spoke to her dead grandmother in a red palace and briefly saw Varen while she was there. Pinfeathers shows up in Isabel's room later, and she attacks him with a fireplace poker and destroying a few things, but then he's gone, and then her dad appears and he's like, WTF! Isabel also learns that there's going to be security and there'll be a crowd of onlookers when the Poe toaster appears to put flowers on his grave. So she needs to come up with a plan to get into the graveyard. She can't just show up there. Her English teacher asks her about Varen, who, remember, he's been missing for several months at this point. Most people assume that he just ran off because of his shitty home life, which is not an unreasonable thing to think. Varen was 17, but we find out that he just recently would have turned 18, and he really didn't like his home life, so it's not unreasonable to think he just ran off. But at the same time, he left his car behind, and he didn't seem to take any money or anything when he left, so Some people are still suspicious, but Isabel does assure her teacher that she doesn't know where Varen is. She's at cheer practice later and she messes up on something, and then she sees Brad, and he's really unhealthy looking and a lot skinnier than she remembers and kind of anxious, and he's on crutches due to his leg injury. And remember, it's been 2 months since he got hurt, so it must have been pretty bad. He's upset with Isabel because she was there when he was hurt, and he doesn't understand exactly what's happening, but he knows something weird is going on. And he tells Isabel to cover her mirrors because that's how they find you, and then he scurries off. And that is the last time in the entire series that Brad does anything noteworthy. He doesn't die, but you know what? I'm just gonna take him off the wall now. There you go. Goodbye, Brad. Later, Isabel sees Varen in a mirror. And that night she dreams about the bookstore that Varen worked at, and there's an old record player there, playing some music at first, but then it plays Isabel's voice saying that she doesn't care about Varen, which is a real thing that she said to her friends in book 1, back when her friends were being really, really weird about the whole thing. She shouts, "I didn't mean it!" And then Varen appears, and he has the ribbon that she gave him before, and he drops it. But that's symbolic of his attachment to her. He thinks that she doesn't care, and now he's letting her go. And then she wakes up. So Isabel and Gwen decide that they should go to the bookstore to go looking for clues. I don't know why, like, they're already planning on going to Baltimore in like a week. Like, isn't that their big plan? Like, just fast forward, author, this book is too long. They're there, they talk to Bruce a little bit, but he doesn't know anything. And then Varen's dad, Joe, shows up, and he yells at Bruce about where his son is, but like I said, Varen recently turned 18, so he doesn't actually have to come home if he doesn't want to. And Varen's dad nearly hears Isabel eavesdropping, and she hides, for some reason. And then she stumbles across a box with the name Madeline written on it. And then she opens the box, and there's a picture of Isabel in there. This belonged to Varen. He stole that picture from her bedroom.
That's weird.
But he wrote a poem on the back and then put it in a box, which he clearly cherishes, so I guess it's not weird. And there's one other picture in the box. It's a picture of his mom, whose name is Madeline. Yeah, he yearns for his mom and Isabel at the same time. Yeah, there's nothing weird about that, don't worry. So Bruce realizes that Isabel is looking for Varen, and he tells her that, hey, when you find him, tell him he has to be back by March. And so it's implying that Bruce is dying and he won't last much longer. Also, Varen is sometimes showing up outside of dreams as an apparition. So Gwen starts making plans to go to Baltimore and help out. You know, she's actually planning and preparing and like doing research and things like that, while Isabel is just existing. Like, who's the protagonist again? Like, who's the one that wants to save Varen again? Okay. Isabel runs into Pinfeathers yet again, and he shows her a vision of Edgar Allan Poe dying and shouting about Reynolds. And as he's doing that in a hospital, knocks appear and a silver cord emerges from Poe's chest. And then Lilith shows up, and she appears to be sucking away his soul or something. It's not explained well. But then Reynolds cuts the cord and the vision ends. And Isabel decides that this means Reynolds killed Edgar Allan Poe. It's kind of hard to say what happened based on what she witnessed, but she is convinced that that's what happened. And also, did I mention that this whole time Isabel hasn't been at home during this vision? She's been outside because she snuck out of her house at 4 a.m. Varen's stepmom, Darcy, appears and finds her. What's she doing outside at 4 a.m.? That's never explained, but she's outside. And then Isabel, for some reason, runs away. Like, she just sprints off into the darkness, and then she hides in a dumpster. There was no need for that. I did like that scene, though. It's the only scene in the books that is ridiculous enough to actually make me laugh out loud. And then later, Isabel goes home, and her mom asks if she's been leaving food in her room because she smells like garbage. Gwen deduces that the flowers that Reynolds leaves on Poe's grave every year come from a rose garden that she saw in her dream. And that might sound like it's important, but it's not. It goes nowhere. When Isabel is packing for her trip to Baltimore, Danny asks her if she's running away. And he tells her that her parents are considering making her see a psychiatrist because he doesn't know what's up, but he knows something is going wrong. Anyways, finally, after several hundred pages, Isabel and her dad go to Baltimore. Gwen sends her some coded text messages. Instead of just saying, hey, I'm over here, she sends her some code. Like she pretends that she's visiting friends back in Brooklyn. I don't know why she's doing this. Like they didn't hash out a code ahead of time. This just seems like a good way to confuse each other. Isabel is out to dinner with her dad, and then she sneaks off and finds Gwen, and then the two of them drive off. However, while they're driving off, they get stuck in traffic. Try telling him, Gwen railed at the surrounding cars. Think anybody here's ever heard of the phrase, go around? Look at the blinkers, you schmendricks. When the blinkers are blinking, that doesn't mean you sit there and blink with them. You go around. Now, schmendrick is a Yiddish word. It means stupid person. Did I mention that Gwen is Jewish yet? I don't know if I brought that up, but the books mention a couple more times that Gwen is, in fact, Jewish. So they reach the cemetery, and the gate is locked, so Gwen decides to pick the lock on the gate. Isabel, the supposed main character, stands there and goes, what are you, crazy? Girl, you're the one that wants to get in here. What's your plan? Gwen also, did all the reconnaissance, so she knows when it's safe, and she knows that they won't be watched while she's doing this. So she picks the lock with some orthodontic tools that belong to her dad. Because her dad is a dentist. Are there any more stereotypes you want to throw in here?
Gosh darn it, that's racist!
I don't think we ever learn Gwen's last name, but that's probably a good thing because I feel like this author would name her something like Gwendolyn Cohen Silverstein Goldberg Netanyahu Greenberg. Isabel gives a long monologue about how she loves Varen. At least I think that's what she's monologuing about. She doesn't make any actual points. She just talks for a bit. This book really needed another draft, is all I'm saying. They're hiding out in the graveyard waiting for midnight, but while they're doing that, they fall asleep, and Isabel has a dream where she's shoved into a sarcophagus. She wakes up, and it's well past midnight, so she runs into the cemetery and finds Reynolds. She tackles him, and he's actually really shocked to see her, but the entire book, up until this point, has just been wasting time to get to this moment, and this takes more than 400 pages to happen. Reynolds says that if she crosses into the other world, she'll die. But Gwen appears, and she holds Reynolds back while Isabel runs into some catacombs and closes a door behind her because she feels like that's a good idea. And now she's in the dream world because I don't know. I don't know how entering and exiting this place works. She immediately runs into Scrimshaw, who is another Knock, kind of like Pinfeathers, except he's blue. And he hates her because he's the one that chased her in the park that night in book 1, and as revenge for that, Reynolds cut him into pieces. But again, Knocks are very difficult to kill, so he just regenerated after that. Now, Scrimshaw can actually hurt Isabel because he wasn't made by Varen, he was made by Edgar Allan Poe. And Isabel was like, oh shit, and then she runs away. The watch that Danny got her for Christmas can point her in the right direction. I think it's like an anchor to the real world or something. It is not explained. Maybe the books could have spent some time explaining that instead of doing nothing, but whatever, she eventually finds Pinfeathers. So he fights Scrimshaw while she runs away, and both Scrimshaw and Pinfeathers seemingly die during the fight. They get torn open, and Isabel is able to see that Scrimshaw has a portrait of Virginia, who was Edgar Allan Poe's wife, on his heart, and Pinfeathers actually has a portrait of Isabel on his heart. She winds up at an old Victorian mansion, kind of like the one Varen lives in, and inside is a vision of Madeline, his birth mother, remember, playing piano. And then Lilith appears yet again. She taunts Isabel a bit and tells Reynolds, who is also there, to kill her, because he's now there too. And he's apparently compelled to obey what she says, but he gives Isabel a sword to defend herself with. And Isabel realizes that because she has control over this world, she can give herself the ability to sword fight. Okay, so Reynolds and Isabel fight for a little bit, and then Isabel runs down a hallway and suddenly she's on a balcony. I know that this is kind of confusing and doesn't make sense, but again, it's a dream world. It doesn't operate by the rules of the real world. She can see Varen off in the distance standing on a nearby cliff. Reynolds says that there's no way she's going to be able to reach him this way, but she's like, no, I'm going to do it anyways. So she brings some statues to life and tells them to go fight Reynolds, and then they do. And they hold him back for a while. It's actually a pretty cool moment, you know? Every book in this series has at least one moment that makes Isabel look like a good protagonist. You know, she has cool powers, and even without them, she doesn't just run away or allow other people to protect her. You know, she's genuinely brave and genuinely kind sometimes. And that makes reading these even more frustrating because I see how this story could have been 10 times better. You know, imagine if it was about Isabel traveling through the dream world to rescue the man she loves, or what if it was about Isabel and Varen working together to fight Lilith, the demon, you know? That would be cooler, that's all I'm saying. So Isabel runs for a while longer, and finally she reaches Varen. And they kiss, but he seems kind of cold, and then he says she's just like everyone else, and throws her off a cliff.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
So we immediately cut to Isabel in a hospital waiting room. Danny is there, and he's asleep, and he doesn't react when Isabel tries to talk to him. Some doctors are there trying to resuscitate Isabel, like she's looking at her own body on a hospital bed. And after a minute, the doctors declare that, okay, yeah, she's dead. But she manages to snap back into her body, and then she wakes up. And then we have the epilogue. Varen has Isabel's watch, and he is being emo and filled with guilt over trying to kill her, because he thinks that he really did kill her. He thinks that she's actually dead. And that's the end of Book 2. Then we reach the epic finale, Book 3, Oblivion. Much like Book 2, this is a whole lot of nothing followed by a climax that drags on for way too long. In fact, the climax of this book is basically the entire second half. It goes on for a while. Much like Book 2, there is very little romance, and the world building is non-existent. But there are a few good scenes here and there. So the prologue has Edgar Allan Poe at a woman's house, and he says that she needs to say she'll love him or he'll die. And that's it. That, again, the prologue is pointless and didn't add anything. Isabel writes a love letter to Varen, and she chastises herself for not being able to let him go, because it's almost Valentine's Day, meaning that he has been gone for far longer than they were together. They were together for, they were kind of ish dating for like a week, and now he's been gone for over 4 months. Come on, girl, have a little self-respect. Also, Isabel still has not told Gwen what happened after they got separated at the graveyard. Like, Gwen can tell that something went wrong, but she can't tell exactly how it went wrong, because Isabel sucks. In fact, while Gwen was fighting with Reynolds, her arm got broken, so their friend Mikey actually came all the way to Baltimore to drive her home, and now they're dating. And that's a better love story than anything else I've read so far, at least after the first book. Isabel has been pretending that she doesn't remember what happened after she left dinner with her dad. Sure, you know, no one believes that her memory is gone. They think something bad happened and she just doesn't want to talk about it. Also, Bruce is dead from his cancer now. Yeah, that wasn't important. That can just happen off screen. That's fine. Isabel is now being forced to go see a therapist named Dr. Robinson. So fuck it, here's Mrs. Robinson from The Graduate. None of you get that reference. So Isabel and Dr. Robinson are talking about what happened in Baltimore, and Isabel is still lying and saying, yeah, I don't remember what happened. Robinson brings up Varen, and Isabel says, he had nothing to do with what happened to me. But Robinson points out that, hey, if you can't remember anything, then how do you know that Varen had nothing to do with it? So she knows Isabel is lying because Isabel is really bad at it. And Isabel just finally relents and goes, look, Varen is lost. Later, Danny tells Isabel that their parents are going on a date night, which is apparently unusual. And Danny's concerned about Isabel, but in a younger sibling way where he doesn't want to come right out and say it. Like, he doesn't want to come right out and say, look, I care about you and I'm worried. Like, it's kind of cute. I kind of like it. He says that their parents fight a lot when she's not around, and that he's been having a lot of bad dreams lately, dreams where she dies. And he asks where the watch he got her is, and she says that she dropped it. And then he realizes, just like Dr. Robinson, he realizes, like, she wouldn't remember that if she truly didn't remember anything. She is lying. No one sees through your bullshit better than your younger siblings. Isabel has yet another bad dream, and the next day parts of her school have been vandalized and there's dust everywhere. And she's like, well, this probably has something to do with the dream stuff, but I don't know which. But I don't know what. And everyone assumes that Varen did it, so Gwen pushes Isabel for a little while, and finally Isabel just tells her everything about what happened. This takes several pages, but she tells her, like, yeah, there's some sort of weird dream world and Varen got trapped there. Like, that's the gist of it. And then she's also like, I love him so much, I have to go and rescue him, because, again, they were kind of ish dating for a week. Isabel also tells Gwen the truth about how Varen did try to kill her, And she says that she's scared of him and doesn't know what he wants anymore, which is just so romantic, but Gwen sings her a lullaby to calm her down. And apparently the word lullaby actually means Lilith be gone, which is foreshadowing. Not really. It seems like foreshadowing, like they might have to sing to get rid of Lilith, but no, that's not what happens. Anyways, they go to the cemetery for Bruce's funeral and they hear gunshots nearby. They're scared at first, but you think they would be used to that because remember, they live in Trenton, Ohio. Gunshots are just a thing you're gonna hear sometimes while you're there. But it's actually fine because you see Bruce used to be a Green Beret, so he has a military funeral and there's a 21-gun salute there. At the service, there's a picture of Bruce's son who died when he was only 18. His name was William Gray Nobit, and Isabel realizes that Varen was a surrogate son for Bruce, and Bruce was a surrogate father for Varen. Which would have been a lot better if it wasn't spelled out, or if it was from Varen's perspective, or if it got any time devoted to it in the slightest. And you might think that this relationship will come back later, but it doesn't. Anyways, Darcy, Varen's stepmom, is still there, for some reason, and Isabel gives her the note that Varen left for her when he first disappeared. They go back to school, and then Reynolds appears, and he's covered in ash. He convinces Isabel to follow him. Where are they going? Doesn't matter. He convinces her to follow him, and while she's following him, she hears Gwen covering for her absence. Again. Like, I don't know why the author decided to make Gwen the one who actually goes out and does everything. I kind of want to read a rewritten version of this story. You know, it's from Gwen's perspective. She goes to a new town, makes a new friend, and her friend is stumbling into this supernatural conflict, and she has to try and help her without really understanding what's going on. Anyways, Isabel doesn't trust Reynolds despite him saving her life multiple times. But he says that Varen believes that he killed her, and he feels intense guilt over it. You haunt him at every step. The guilt for what he believes he has done has all but devoured his sanity. His subconscious conjures your image without end. In short, your memory has become his everlasting nightmare. I actually really like that idea, because that sounds like something Edgar Allan Poe would come up with. But again, show, don't tell. You know, show us Varen being consumed by his guilt. That's a lot better than just hearing about it secondhand. But anyways, Reynolds says that Isabel might be able to astral project into the dream world and save Varen, but he's attacked by something and then he disappears. So Isabel manages to step out of her body and join Reynolds in the dream world. He tells her that he did kill Edgar Allan Poe, but it was because Poe wanted to die. He became a link between worlds, and Lilith was going to use him for some sort of evil purposes. And now Varen is becoming a link, and his self-hatred is causing him to create bad things that will grow out of control. Isabel needs to find the light within Varen, whatever that means. So she goes through the woodlands for a while, and there are some figures there that are following her and whispering about her, but she just ignores them because that way she'll look like she's part of the dream and she won't stand out. She winds up in Varen's bedroom, and Scrimshaw is there. He's asleep though, he's recovering from being torn to pieces. There's also a doll there that represents Varen's mom, and she asks the doll why she left. Then Scrimshaw wakes up and a bunch of insects appear and swarm over Isabel, but she realizes that, hey, I'm in the dream world, I'm in control here, and she makes them vanish. Eventually she finds Varen again. She makes some lights appear so that he can see she is not part of the dream. And they touch, and just as he's realizing what's happening, he's realizing, hey, she's still alive, I didn't kill her, a bunch of knocks attack. And then Reynolds reappears and he chastises her for interacting with the dream. And then she snaps back to reality, and she goes to Varen's house in the real world so she can speak to Darcy. And Darcy says, Varen never said he loved anything, but he loved you. You're special. Yes, thank you for being special for no discernible reason, main character girl. Darcy tells her that Varen's mom actually changed her name and moved to Boston. She has not spoken to Varen or Joe since she left, and when she sees how Varen's absence is making his parents really sad, Isabel decides that she needs to tell her parents everything just in case she disappears. On her way home, Varen appears, because sure, we could use another short and pointless scene like that. Isabel tells him that she loves him, and he says, that's why you're gone. And then he brings a storm, so heavy winds start blowing around in the middle of Trenton, Ohio, and the ground cracks open and stuff gets destroyed and nobody can even tell the difference, but they're still freaking out. It seems like the dream world and the real world are starting to merge. So Isabel manages to force Varen back to the dream world by focusing on him. And then Pinfeathers and Scrimshaw appear again, and nothing important happens. Isabel tries to run, but she realizes that Scrimshaw can now follow her into the real world, and she doesn't want to risk him hurting her family, so she decides to defeat him in the dream world. Time for the obligatory cool scene that gives me false hope that things might get better. So Isabel changes into her cheerleader uniform, and she makes a bunch of copies of herself, also wearing the same outfit, so that Scrimshaw can't identify which one is her. They start moving and shuffling around, and he attacks them, destroying the illusions one by one. It's actually a pretty tense scene, because Isabel's not sure what to do, and she's not sure how to kill this guy, or if she can even hurt him in a way that will hold him off for more than a couple of minutes. So she's just wondering what to do, but eventually he catches her, and she realizes that his weakness would be Virginia, who, remember, was Edgar Allan Poe's wife who died. So she creates an illusion of Virginia, and Scrimshaw is just transfixed by it. And he goes on for a minute about how much Poe, and himself by extension, loved her, and it would be cute if it weren't for one thing. And then Scrimshaw just surrenders and disappears. I guess he's dead now. Then Pinfeathers emerges, and he says that he and Varen both love her. Does this count as a love triangle? Like, I'm gonna say no, because Pinfeathers is just an extension of Varen, a magical extension of Varen, but I don't know, there might be people in the comments that disagree with me. Does this qualify as a love triangle? And then Pinfeathers also dies, and he just leaves Varen's jacket behind. And then Lilith appears as a clone of Isabel for a minute, and then she disappears. So Isabel goes home. Her parents are out looking for her because she vanished again, and so Danny's the only one there. And Danny says that in his dreams, he sees Varen kill her every night. And also their mom is trying to divorce their dad, which sounds like kind of a pointless subplot, but I kind of like it. You know, a lot of books like this will have the main characters go off and get into trouble without really acknowledging how much stress that causes everyone around them. So having Isabel do this and it's causing tensions in her parents' marriage, that, you know, I kind of like that. So she calls her dad over the phone and tells him that she loves him before she enters the dream world again. And Danny tells her that Varen will see her again when she's wearing his jacket, because Pinfeathers was visiting him in his dreams and giving him cryptic hints that he is now relaying to Isabel. And apparently also he said, memories make better weapons than words. And Isabel goes into her bedroom and locks the door, and Danny starts banging on her door, begging her to stay, but she has to go and rescue Varen, so she goes back into the dream and finds Varen in her old classroom. He confesses that he always had a crush on her and he tried to suppress his feelings. We were better off that way, he went on, glancing up at her again. Well, you were better off, back when I assumed you thought you were better than everyone else, which, ironically enough, allowed me to go on telling myself that you were beneath me, back when you believed I was everything everyone said I was. I like their romance at first, because they are jumping to conclusions about each other, and they're slowly realizing that they were wrong. And like, I just wish the books had focused on that more. You know, this sort of confession from him might hit a lot harder if they ever had an actual relationship. And Varen says everyone was right about him. You know, he's awful because he still thinks he killed her. He thinks that this vision of Isabel he's talking to is part of the dream world. But she says that she's still alive, so Varen conjures a gun and threatens to kill her. For some reason, apparently, quote, his self-hatred has become a drug, which, again, that's something that might be kind of interesting if it wasn't just spelled out. Like, if we saw him struggle with trying to be better because he thinks that it's pointless, that could be neat. So anyways, Varen jumps out a window, and Isabel, using her cheerleader ability to fall without hurting herself, jumps out the window as well. So her being a cheerleader came in handy exactly one time. She catches up with him and holds his hand, and she tells him that she can't save him, he has to save himself, but she can convince him that he is worth saving. She changes their surroundings to the spot where they first kissed, you know, at the dance way back in book 1, and then they kiss again, and just as it seems they're starting to make progress, Brad appears and attacks Varen, and his dad is there and also attacks him too. And the two of them get separated. Like I said, the scenery in the dream world just kind of randomly changes all the time, so if things are confusing, I do apologize, but it doesn't make a whole lot more sense when you're reading. The doll, which was representing Varen's mom, has disappeared from where it was, but she finds Varen again immediately, so them getting separated is fine and doesn't cause any issues. She reads him some poetry, and then they kiss again. He still thinks that she's dead, though, because we need this to go on for another 130 fucking pages. The area that they're in floods, and Isabel gets swept out to sea. And when she gets swept out, she loses her Hamas pendant. Hamsa pendant! God fucking damn it, autocorrect. The area they're in floods, and Isabel gets swept off to sea, and she loses her Hamza pendant. And a creature grabs her and nearly drowns her, but she manages to grab onto her pendant again, and then the creature swims away because the pendant is protecting her. Lilith appears, and she's like, "Mwahaha, I'm evil," and then Isabel and Varen run away from her, and she gives him the pendant so that he can be protected, so they snap back to their school in the real world. And then Reynolds appears and threatens Varen, and then Lilith is there, and she refers to Reynolds as Gordon, even though before there was a kind of sort of twist about how his real name was Augustus. I guess we're just forgetting about that. So now Reynolds has a choice, because he's bound to Lilith somehow. He can kill Varen, which will stop Lilith's evil plans, but then he'll be imprisoned by her forever. Or he can just sort of stand aside, let Lilith do her thing, and he'll probably get imprisoned for all time anyways. So he actually cuts the pendant off of Varen's neck and wraps it around his sword, and then he stabs Lilith in the chest. The combination of the sword and the pendant hurts her really badly, and she is disabled for a few minutes. He only bought them a little bit of time, though, so Isabel and Varen run away. They wind up at their school's Valentine's Day dance, which is a thing that is apparently happening, and Gwen is there. People notice Varen, and they start snapping photos of him, and then Isabel and some others all move towards the exit. A bunch of Nox attack, but remember, they're invisible, and no one knows what's happening. So there's just complete chaos in the middle of all this. In the middle of the chaos, Isabel sees that her dad is there for some reason, and also the detective that was looking for Varen before. So they're like, well, we can't stay here, so the two of them grab Gwen and take her into the dream world with them, because apparently they can do that. The Nox attack them, but they fight back, and Isabel tells Varen that because he created the Nox, he can control them. But then an army of lost souls appear. Like, remember the lost souls from the giant party back in the first book? With the Mask of the Red Death thing? Yeah, I forgot about them too, but they appear, and they fight all the Nox. And one Nox actually takes on the form of Varen, and the two of them fight. Isabel tries to teach Gwen how to manipulate the dream so that they can help Varen, and it works. They help him out, and he kills the Nox. Reynolds appears, and Gwen doesn't know who he is, so she threatens him with some pepper spray for a minute. Like, I like Gwen. She's got spirit. But Isabel tells her that, like, no, this guy's fine, and so everything's safe. And Reynolds says that when he originally died, Edgar Allan Poe was on his way to marry the woman from the prologue. Like, he wanted to break his soul bond to Lilith by forming a new one. So Isabel and Varen, if they want to stop Lilith, need to do the same thing. But now they're at Bruce's house, and Varen is mad that Bruce is dead, so now he's evil, I guess. Lilith appears, and once again is like, "Mwahahaha, I'm evil." But Isabel tells Varen to take her ribbon, and he kisses Lilith instead, and she's like, "No, it's such a betrayal, it's so terrible." However, immediately after he kisses Lilith, he starts spitting up black liquid because Lilith has entered his body and is now starting to take over. Reynolds appears, and Isabel realizes, like, oh, okay, Varen and Reynolds created some sort of plan to kill Lilith, or at least stop her, but Varen's probably going to die too. And then they halfway merge with the real world. They're in the middle of the street, there's wind blowing and debris crashing around, and things are being destroyed, and they are surrounded by police officers. And Varen just has a gun now.
Wait, where did he get a gun from? I don't know.
So he holds it up and the police shoot him. So he basically commits suicide by cop. Cut to about 2 weeks later, Isabel is at a grave. The book doesn't specify whose grave it is, she's just at a grave. And she thinks about Reynolds and the other lost souls who are probably free now, and then Varen pops up. He's still alive. Apparently his heart stopped after he got shot and he got resuscitated, so that counts as dying. And because Lilith was bonded to him when that happened, she died for real, I think. Again, the stuff with demons is never really explained. The grave they're at belongs to Bruce. And also Varen's hair is blonde now because goths don't get love. What is this Breakfast Club bullshit? Varen asks her to prom, and she says yes. Later that night, Isabel is woken up by a noise. Apparently her old watch has mysteriously appeared in her bedroom, you know, the one she lost, along with a copy of a book called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, which was a novel written by Edgar Allan Poe. And she remembers back when Lilith referred to Reynolds as Gordon. So the cemetery where Poe is buried just sort of appears in her front yard, but her watch is there, and that's indicating that this is the real world. So, like, what is happening here? What's an illusion and what's the dream world? How can the dream world affect the real world, and when? I don't know. This is like 5 pages before the book ends. So Isabel goes up to Poe's grave, and Reynolds is there, and he takes a minute to explain that he needed to pretend to be on Lilith's side to get Varen to bring her into the real world so that she could be killed. It turns out his ability, Reynolds' ability, to cross between worlds came from Poe, because Edgar Allan Poe wrote Reynolds' life story as a book, like The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, and that's what created the link for him in the dream world and the real world. Like, okay, sure. Edgar Allan Poe's soul appears off in the distance, and he actually tips his hat to Isabel, and Reynolds says goodbye to her, and then him and Poe walk away together. They're going to the afterlife, whatever that consists of. Isabel wakes up for real, and her dad is there watching her sleep. Okay. He says they're going out for ice cream later and says that Varen can come along, so it's indicating that he thinks this guy is okay. And this is after he pulled a gun on the cops and got shot. Like, also, why was Varen not arrested after that? Like, did the cops just think that being shot was punishment enough for him? How exactly does the judicial system work in Trenton, Ohio? And then we have the epilogue, which is really short but does have a bit of really neat character development. Because Varen and Isabel are in an ice cream shop in Boston 2 years later. And Varen's mom comes into the shop and has a girl with her, presumably her daughter. And instead of saying hello, which he was initially planning to do, Varen just watches them leave. And then he says to Isabel that he wants to go to the beach. And then it ends. Yeah, Varen let go of his mommy issues. This is the one time in the entire trilogy where we see how he feels about something instead of having someone else just come out and say it. And that's it. That is Nevermore. So Nevermore. These are 3 very long books, but they are completely lacking in substance. You know, it's just girl meets boy, they fall in love, and then some weird magical stuff happens. Like, the dream world kind of tries to explore the twisted, tortured recesses of Varen's mind, but it's all so surface level and so lacking in subtlety and nuance that it feels silly. You know, Varen was abandoned by one of his parents, and the other one is a controlling, emotionally abusive alcoholic. Not a whole lot is said about his relationship with his stepmom, just he doesn't like her. But it does make sense for him to have some issues stemming from all that. But there's no real exploration of how that sort of thing affects people or how they can heal and move on from it. The books aren't even really edgy. You know, if they were edgy and had tons of abuse and messed up nonsense, it would at least be funny. You know, it would at least stand out a little, and it would fit given some of the subject matter that's featured here. You know, like, these books talk at least a little bit about alcoholism, bullying, and child abuse. So, like, you could throw in some edgy shit and it would make sense, it would fit. I'm not saying you should have made these books really edgy, but, like, it would have been something. The books don't have a whole lot to do with Edgar Allan Poe either. There's just some references to his work. You know, I was expecting to learn that he based all his writing on things he found in the dream world, or he accidentally created the dream world with his grief, or Varen is like the reincarnation of Edgar Allan Poe, or, you know, something, but no, he's just referenced a bunch. And as for Isabel, there's just not that much to say about her. Like, in book 1, she is a bit different than I was expecting. You know, she's a popular cheerleader with a boyfriend instead of just an eternally single loner who popped into existence when the story started. You know, how rare is that in crappy young adult paranormal romance from 15 years ago? Like, that's pretty rare. She has cool powers too. her control over the dream world, that's neat. I liked that, and she does do a few cool things with it. She doesn't just defeat the villain at the end while being carried by others the whole way before that, which, again, that usually happens in this genre. In fact, Isabel doesn't defeat Lilith at all at the end. She helps, she inspires Varen to do what needs to be done, and ultimately Varen is the one that saves the day. But, other than that, what else is there to Isabel? She doesn't plan or prepare anything. Gwen does most of that. Why does she love Varen exactly? I couldn't tell you. There's just no development for her after book 1. And that's the most I can say about most of the characters. As for the story, well, what story? It's very threadbare. It's literally just Isabel wondering what's going on, thinking about how she wants to rescue Varen, and then going to the dream world to try and rescue him, and then just repeat that as needed. There's a lot of details and subplots that are just left completely unresolved. Like what happened to Brad? The books kind of just forget about him after a while. They also forget about Varen's group of friends from book 1, one of whom, Lacey, I think that was Lilith, just in human form, but they completely forget about Brad's other friends. Are Isabel's parents still getting divorced? How does Varen deal with the death of Bruce, his apparent father figure? Are Gwen and Mikey doing okay? How does Isabel bother explaining all of this crap to her family? We just don't know. All of this is left unresolved. And then there's the world building, which I have very little to say about because the books have very little to say about it. I don't understand the dream world. I don't understand Lilith. The dream world exists and can be affected by thoughts and emotions. Cool. But beyond that, there's nothing. How does it work? How come it sometimes merges with the real world? What makes Varen and Edgar Allan Poe special and able to form a link between the worlds? Lilith is a demon, but what is a demon in this world? Is she the embodiment of evil? Is she something that latches on to bad thoughts? And also, what's her goal? She wants to enter the real world, sure, but then what? Does she want to kill everyone? Does she want to take over? Does she want to feed on people's hatred? Explain things. I read over 1,500 pages of this shit. You could elaborate a little. I gotta say, I can see why Nevermore never really took off. It had an audience. It seems to have sold reasonably well back when it came out, but it's largely been forgotten. I always try to find something unique in all the books I talk about, especially when I spend this long talking about them. Because even terrible books come from someone's labor and someone's thoughts. There's almost always something that I can point at and say, that made me think something I've never thought. Or, maybe I can approach it from an angle that gives us a bit more insight into the world around us and the human condition, even if it's a really bad book. But Nevermore doesn't have anything like that. Other than a few small things, which I've already brought up, it feels very sterile. It feels bereft of life and humanity. The epilogue of the whole series, where Varen doesn't say hello to his mother, and he's just letting her go and accepting that she abandoned him, that has real emotional weight. Danny and Isabel's relationship has real emotional weight. Isabel and Varen's relationship at first has very real emotional weight. Isabel is a good person, and seeing her cut her friends out of her life because they're being bullies was nice to see. The times where Isabel fights in the dream world are cool. But all of that is barely featured, and beyond that, there's just nothing to get attached to. Nevermore just isn't that interesting. And, for a book series that advertised itself as being about bringing the stories of Edgar Allan Poe to life, that's weird. There's just so much untapped potential here, and it shines through at a few points. It's like stars in the night sky. That infinite black void makes the few pinpricks of light beautiful in a way that we can't appreciate during the daytime. So that's everything for Nevermore. I am sorry again for taking so long to get this video out. I wanted it out quite a while ago, but it just didn't happen, man. And I don't know what my next very brief summary is going to be, but stay tuned to find out. Rate this video, comment on it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, check out my second channel, check out my merchandise, become a patron or a YouTube channel member to get access to special bonus stuff. Whew, that's all. I'm tired. Goodbye. Hello there, friends. You watched this far. You know who I am. You see all these names here? These are the names of my patrons. My $10 and up patrons are Arthur D. Gonzalez Martin, Brother Santodes, Carolina Clay, Chibs Ahoy, Jace Spades, Lexi Delorme, Lord Tiebreaker, Michael and Katie Hake, Mr. A5013, Proscriptions of Zhuojang, Psych XS, Slumbering Jellyfish, Observing Outer Space, Tesla Shark, Toa Michael, Vevictus, and Wesley. Without these guys, I could not do what it is I do. If you want to get your name here, then consider donating to my Patreon. If you don't feel like doing that, you can also become a YouTube channel member, get access to exclusive videos once a month. You also get early access to all my regular videos. But if that doesn't appeal to you, or you just, for whatever reason, don't feel like doing it, like this video, comment on it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, share the video around, that helps immensely. You can also check out my merchandise store down below. I got t-shirts and stuff for sale. Buy them before, the tariffs completely render them unaffordable for everybody. Goodbye.